Good evening, baseball fans. Welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. It's Carl. I am joined by Chris Castellani, and we are fresh off an NLDS thriller, Phillies over the Braves for the second year in a row. We'll consider this a special edition podcast. We're posting it as soon as we're done. Instant reaction in a sport that's so easy to wax poetic and talk about history and generational talents and storylines and get real deep and weird. Baseball loves to do that and make these grandiose, hyperbolic statements. I'm going to keep it very simple about this Philadelphia Phillies team. I'm jealous. I watch this team play as just a baseball fan. I am so jealous of how much these guys rule and dominate the city of Philadelphia right now. They're the coolest team in baseball that I can remember, other than, of course, my Cubs. Chris, your instant reaction.
My instant reaction is that nothing about this felt fluky. The Philadelphia Phillies were the better team in this series, front to back. The Braves are a lucky bunch that they did not get swept in this best of five. You give credit to Philadelphia. They out-hit Atlanta. They hit for more power than Atlanta. They outpitched Atlanta. This is a well-assembled team that once again continues to show off that Dave Dombrowski magic that makes him one of the greatest executives of all time. And I'm with you. You know, this is a team that with a lot of veterans, a lot of highly paid guys, and yet they play with a level of toughness and grit that you kind of wouldn't expect. It was like that last year, but it's almost as if last year was a teaser trailer for the main attraction that we've gotten this season. They're red hot. Their fans are feeling it. They deserve it. This is one of those moments in a rivalry that you always are capable of putting a stake in and being like, hey, you remember the time we knocked you out in the playoffs twice? To do it in 4 games, back-to-back years, all the credit goes to Rob Thompson's bunch. They're firing on all cylinders right now.
Just a lovable team. Mm-hmm. Firing on all cylinders, made for the playoffs. This should call into question, too, as teams reload the offseason and put together new strategies. Does it really matter if you win the division? Do you need to be great for 162, or do you need to just get into the playoffs now that we've seen the top 4 seeds, I believe, went 1 for the playoffs?
There's one division winner still left, and it's the Houston Astros. So yeah, as the only 2 100-plus win teams did not win a playoff game, that being the Dodgers and the Orioles. I wrote a blog about this on Thursday. What has become of baseball now is that it is college basketball, where you can hang as many banners as you want in the regular season, and you can win your conference tournament, and you can go into March red hot, and those things are worth celebrating. Your goal as a head of a Major League Baseball team is to assemble a team that can put a product on the field that can win every single night. So you don't apologize for winning 100 games, but as we see in March, sometimes teams get in as the best team, get knocked out in the first weekend. I think that's what baseball has become now, for better or for worse. It does take away from what the Braves did. They will have that demerit by their name forever. They had an incredible season, but they got to the postseason and got punched in the mouth. I think that's just the way of baseball now. The sample size is diminished greatly by the time you get to October, and a team like Philadelphia and a team like Arizona has taken advantage of it. No need to apologize. They've outplayed their opponents in the postseason.
We'll get to the storylines from today's game, but while we're staying at 30,000 feet, there is a sense of this that in the long run will be more agnostic towards regular season heartbreaking loss or even regular season funks. I think it might normalize the baseball fan's brain for better, where you can look in the long term. I always talk about this. Baseball fans are fucking crazy. Yes. Compared to the players and the way the front office thinks about the day-to-day, baseball fans are crazy. And so the more success you see from teams 5 through 12 in the playoff format, as you're chasing division titles in June, July, is this getting too esoteric?
No, I don't think so. I think that what it is, I think this year is, we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of parity, but I think this year will also be something of an exception. There was a ton of parity this year. Obviously, the Braves were ahead of everybody else, but Astros 90-win team, Rangers 89-win team, Phillies 90-win team. These are really good ball clubs. I just think some years, like in college basketball, you're going to have things that play out pretty chalky. And some years you're going to have a lot of parity and a lot of upsets. I think that this has just been one of those years that has led to a lot of upsets and a lot of dysfunction. But at the same, even though it is from a gambling standpoint an upset, I don't think anyone's coming away from this Phillies series thinking that this is some David versus Goliath. This is a damn good Philadelphia Phillies team. So yeah, they went out and earned it, man.
Yeah, especially if you've been listening to the show, because I want to give Clemmer a ton of credit. I wish he was on this right now. He was on the stream. If you guys saw it, electric stuff on the stream tonight. Thank God he was on that stream. But he had called out Philadelphia a long time ago as being the prime contender to take the Braves down. Yeah. But in a sense, I don't know if anybody knew that they'd be shutting down the Braves offense. I think it was more like the lineup can go toe to toe with them and they have enough starting pitching to hang with theirs. The Phillies absolutely fucking dominated the Braves lineup. And I'm sorry for my language here, guys. I really got to clean it up. But there's a lot of enthusiasm behind this win. The Phillies were undeniably the better ball club in this series.
It's a combination of things. It's two things. Number one, the Braves, or outside of game two, where it was really one bad pitch, the Phillies made every single big pitch that they needed to make in this. It wasn't like it was 1, 2, 3 innings from beginning to end. I mean, that ninth inning in game four is a prime example. You get guys on first and third, nobody out. None of those runs come in to score. That bullpen might not be, it might not be last year's Astros, but they have some guys who have balls to steal, and they came in and delivered. And ultimately, when it comes to Atlanta, and you're right, that we, outside of that little brief glimmer of hope in game two, we never saw the historic Braves offense that we saw this season. But I also think, and I'll show some frustration towards myself here, we overlooked, one, the importance of Charlie Morton, though we did talk about that, and two, going forward, if a pitcher is put on the IL for precautionary reasons, they're injured. Like Max Fried pitched injured. I know that the Braves came back to win that game, but I think one of the big reasons why the biggest reason why this series went the way it did is that the Phillies were able to outpitch Atlanta. And Phillies offense came alive. They hit 10 home runs in this 4-game series. This historically good Braves offense, not a whole lot to show for it. That's a big reason why they're going home.
Nick Castellanos hit like 190 in the postseason last year, I believe.
Yeah, no power either.
History tonight. And that's why I talked about waxing poet. We could come in on the grandest stage. Nick Castellanos rose to the occasion. I do think there is this, I don't want to call him invincible. When you're young and you just think like life goes on forever and you have a certain bounce to yourself and I don't know, you're just like a little bit more reckless. Like that's how I see Nick Castellanos playing the game. Yeah. He's not thinking too far ahead. He's just very much in the moment, enjoying himself. Great fucking competitor. Now, I know you have experience watching him win Detroit, and the big knock against him throughout his career has been, the team could lose, and if Castellanos went 4 for 5, he'd give a hell of an interview. And if the team won and he was 0 for 5, then he would rationalize it as like, hey, I can only control my own, I'm in charge of my own game.
Yeah.
So I don't get too caught up in the team stuff. I think that was him as a younger player, developing himself as a professional. Now I feel like complete 180, and maybe it's just the postseason dramatics, but it looks like he'd give the shirt off his back for the 26 guy on his roster. Looks like he's doing anything he could possibly do to advance a team. So I don't know if it's just a matter of circumstance. He did cement himself tonight. He's an absolute legend now. And he's in a... Would you say the first tier? Is he like a first tier postseason moment?
Oh, for active players, definitely. Yeah.
So like as we reflect on his career, like you'd consider him an October stud based on what he did this series.
That's the biggest moment of his career. Like if he retired right now, that would be the moment that we would all remember him for, I would say. And I agree, just as somebody who watched Castellanos come up through the system and go through Detroit, I think, I've done a 180 on him as well. I always had issues with him as a player. His, sometimes the lack of power would bother me. I knew he was a good hitter. The Tigers did a terrible job developing him. They put him at third base. They put him out in right field. And ultimately, that whole, that argument of this guy, he's more selfish, he doesn't play for the team, sometimes is very true. But when you look at Castellanos' years in Detroit, the last 3 teams he played for lost 98 games, and 114 games. Like, sorry, man, I don't care how much you're getting paid. Sometimes it's hard to get up for that. I'm not surprised he immediately goes to the Cubs, starts ripping doubles and home runs. I think what it is with Castellanos right now, is he feels not just financial security, but personal security here because he knows he has a home. I think in Detroit, there was constant talks about him getting traded. He goes to Cincinnati, puts up some really good years in Cincinnati, but there were rumors about, are they going to bring him back? He wanted to resign there. They never called back. Dave Dombrowski's always loved him. He's going to be there for a long time. He fits in perfectly in that lineup. And even some of his issues, like sometimes the ability to chase out of the zone and some of the defensive woes kind of go away because you put him 7th. Nick Castellanos, 7th in a lineup. That dude is going to crush. Perfect situation for him. Yeah, I think he's grown up a lot as a person and as a player. And that moment tonight was, the shining moment of his career.
Let's get real speculative here. I'm willing to bet that the fact he can't escape to DH on this specific 2023 club forced a different attitude to the season or approach. Clemmer would hate that. Thank God he's not on this because he would just destroy that comment. But that's why I said pure speculation, because with Schwarber, with Harper coming back from injury, there's really he can't escape into the designated hitter role. And I think honestly, I don't even think he wants to be a DH. So it just elevates fucking mind, body, spirit showing up to the field, getting ready, lifting. And he does lift hard. There's a little inside with the sleeves up.
He's always been in great shape. That's what always annoyed me about his defense is I always got the impression he should be a very good defender. He's always kept himself in great shape, always been a good athlete. Came up, I believe, as a shortstop, which obviously a lot of guys do. Yeah, huge moment for him this evening. I think last year was kind of like with a lot of these guys. It was kind of the precursor, first real postseason experience. I know he played 2 games for the Reds in 2020 with no fans in the COVID year. But he's seeing red right now, as are a lot of guys on that team.
Hard to overshadow Bryce Harper.
Yes, it is.
As here we are over 10 minutes into the show. Bryce Harper will go down as one of the best contracts in sports history.
He's underpaid. He got one of the biggest deals in the history of sports, and the guy's underpaid.
Best, probably the best big mega deal in baseball.
I'd agree.
Said and done.
Yeah, and it's not even just the numbers either. It's the attitude. It's the fact that he came back from Tommy John surgery in like a fucking week and a half. The guy, he's out there. The fan base has fallen in love with him, and ultimately, I think that over the last year, I would say starting with the MVP season he had 2 years ago, baseball as a whole did this huge shift on Bryce Harper because when the Nats won it all in 2019, the year after he left, there was this belief of, hey, he leaves, Nats go out and they win the World Series. Was Harper ever that valuable? And then he's one of those guys, you look at the resume right now, he's not quite there yet, but he's approaching that point where if he retired today, is he a Hall of Famer? And he's going to have those cumulative numbers too, because he'll DH in the latter part of his career as well. And that was, you talk about cold-blooded. That game 3 performance, that was one of those jaw-dropping moments. Even the first one especially, just a hanging breaking ball and he crushed it. How about an OPS over 1,000 in a large sample size in the postseason for him? I know we go back and forth on this podcast sometimes about what some guys can bring to October and the kind of psychological impact that he can have. He is reaching that point of being one of the truly elite, all-time great postseason performers. He's such a beast. And they were talking about on Pick Central. He's just fucking cool, man. Bryce Harper's just cool. And that fan base has fallen in love with him. And I think baseball, maybe not Braves fans, but I think baseball has as well.
Yeah, talk about wanting it. He just wants it. He skipped his senior year of high school so he could go first in the draft. He's such a lunatic about making a name for himself historically in the game, and he has had that attitude forever. Part of the reason why he signed with Philly is because he thought he could ignite that fan base, and when it's at its best, it's better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. He was right. We're all fucking jealous of the bank. That place has instantly become just a terrifying theater for October baseball.
No doubt. No doubt. And I think one thing that's cool about Harper, number one, he's a big fan of baseball. That whole thing of hey man, when this place is rocking, he knew that. I really do think he does his research and watches these games dude, I want to play there. And I think what's cool about him is for a guy who has made so much guaranteed money, he still plays one of those first, second year. Hey, you want me to play first? All right, I'll do it. You want me I'm going to go out there and grind. He plays every game he's still got something to prove. And even though he really does, he's got 2 MVPs in his back pocket. Yeah, the Phillies organization changed the second he signed that deal. Yeah.
So I just want to talk a little strategy about what I saw with Bryce Harper today, but first we got to talk about Arcia and like couple comments. First off, I think it's bullshit that people are shitting on the guy. I think it was Cespedes BBQ. I should know this much better. Much more inside clubhouse shit. But the story goes, Arcia was chirping about Bryce Harper getting doubled up. The story gets out. It gets back to Bryce Harper. He's pissed off about it. The Phillies fans are chirping Arcia about it relentlessly. The second part is Arcia was off the rails tonight, yelling at Phillies fans. The clip's out there. It's about as obnoxious as it can get for October baseball. It's one thing to be blowing a kiss, signing a ball, maybe asking for a cute girl's number, but you can't be chirping with fans. So I guess the first part of it is like, this should be is it an overreaction or is it a story?
It's a story that became an overreaction. The story to me is cool. It's rivalry, baseball fodder. I love it. Hey, we won game 2. You got doubled off. I'm going to shit talk you. Harper claps back. Now, he poked the bear, and the bear came back and clawed his face off. So probably not the best guy to clap, but I love that. I like that part of baseball. I like that part of sports. The way that it became this national story about clubhouse culture, Spanish-speaking players, journalistic integrity, all that was bizarre to me. But the moment itself, I think it's great. It's a part of baseball history. We'll talk about it. The first time these two teams play each other next year, he's going to get booed at the bank, and Harper's probably going to get booed at Truist Field. That part of it is cool. The way it's been blown up is bizarre to me, but just the basic story, I think, is dope. It's awesome. I mean, it's baseball rivalry fodder. That's cool to me.
Yeah. It is. It's good rivalry fodder. I understand why Kevin Gossman and some players were upset or voicing discontent about, it's a clubhouse. The players' comments should be kept to themselves. There's a little bit of a line here where it's like, if the guy was just shit talking, like if it was egregious, and he was running around the clubhouse, like that's a funny story. It just depends on the context of making something out of nothing. Now, if you compare this to bat flipping, conflict on the field, throwing at guys, like that's where it's just a complete non-story to me. Like this wasn't anything public confrontational or nothing. If he wants to fuck around with his boys, he's totally entitled to that. And then, like, that's where I don't think it's really that big of a story. Again, I'm not in the club. I don't know to what extent he was laughing about it. Certainly Bryce Harper is paying attention, though.
Yes, and I would also say the Braves' reaction to it after Game 3 made things way worse. If they would have just came out and said, yeah, it happened, we got to come back, we got to win tomorrow, but the way that their players were so adamant, Travis d'Arnaud looked like he was about to cry talking about it. I think that only added fuel to the fire. I think it only made Philly fans, they were going to have no problem getting rowdy anyway, but you get my point. I think that they came across a little bit in this series, and it's such a great organization, right? But they came across a little bit as a mentally weak team, and I think this will be a footnote in their history. I feel it.
For all the criticism baseball has in its own verticals, we love to criticize the commissioner's office, front offices, owners. Baseball players as a whole need way more criticism. The same way that we blame Major League Baseball for not marketing itself, they have to market players better, and players got to stop being such pussies. So many of these players are so sensitive and caught up with what's said about them, and it's trash. There really is. It's an insecure bunch of professional athletes. And I think that's why, as a whole, you see across baseball media where there aren't a lot of shining personalities. And the culture doesn't lend itself to guys opening up and fucking around. Like, there's a reason football guys are, or I should say, like, football content in and of itself. Baseball is just so boring. These guys are so, like, sensitive and scared to say shit. I have a couple different thoughts about this, but I do remember Daniel Hudson told me one time that he did not feel comfortable as a big leaguer until, like, the season before we had this I think this was last year we were hanging out. Like, I shouldn't say, like, hanging out. But the bigger picture is talking to a reliever that has 12, 13 years service time in the big leagues and a World Series ring. It was like, dude, it took me over a decade to feel like I was actually a big leaguer. Most of these guys are waiting for the phone to ring and be like, job's over. Someone else is taking your job. So just as a whole, the culture in of itself of the game is just so fucking sensitive. And baseball players would do themselves just like a lot better service, or maybe Major League Baseball, if they expanded it to, 30 roster spots or did more for guarantees, something to get these guys. They're so anxious. Get the chip off their shoulder, dude. It's just a story. It's just a joke.
I think especially with a guy like Arcia too, who I know he had an all-star season this year, but came up as a huge prospect, was kind of an afterthought. I mean, dude, in April, they thought Vaughn Grisham was going to be their opening day shortstop. So when he sees something like this come out, I'm sure there was definitely like an oh fuck moment for him, but so I do get your point with that for sure.
I loved Bryce Harper's approach today. I want to get back to that for a second. Because he's coming from Bryce Elder where he mashed into Spencer Strider, and that's just such a huge difference for the Phillies. And I thought that could go one of two ways. It ended up going a little bit in the middle. I think he gave up 3 homers. Strider gave up 3 bombs, right?
He did, yeah.
Okay. Right after Bryce Harper missed that throw at first base, and he struggled over at first base. I thought you knew the quality at bat and coming afterwards. Like, it's like Mario Kart. He's going over a star. He fucked up. When you're in 8th place, he's going to play catch up or whatever. You just knew Bryce Harper has a little bit of a setback. Here he goes. And I think he drew a walk, had a single, and then almost hit a bomb in his last at bat. The dude just gets absolutely fucking dialed in. But his approach is so steady. He could let Spencer Strider tonight. When he got 2 strikes, he basically just said, I'm going to foul off your fastball, or at least play it to the left field line and let the ball get as deep as possible. Because I'm not going to get beat on your off-speed stuff. And you saw it, I think, in his second at bat, where he had fouled off a number of fastballs that were 97 to 100 and then got his breaking ball over the plate. And I also thought Spencer Strider was a little preoccupied with Trey Turner at first base and just had some issues controlling the running game. And that's a good indicator if the situation's getting out of hand or the pressure's too much. It's one thing to watch the command, but he was so occupied with Trey Turner. And I think that's when you start thinking bigger than the pitch in front of you. The best you can do is just execute one pitch at a time. And there was a couple moments where Trey Turner was on first base. I think he disengaged twice with Bryce Harper, another time after that. When you have that type of stuff, just go at the hitter in the big moment. And I think that's something. Spencer Strider's freaking out on the way out. And he's a very self-studied, reflective guy, student of the game. So he will get better from this, but I'd be interested to hear where he thought he went off the rails. I think mentally he would say he did lose focus.
That's really interesting analysis, man, honestly. But I'm with you. I think that at the same time, that's kind of a reflection of who he is as a pitcher, because he's a guy, high strikeout rate, low whip, but his ERA bizarrely was close to the 4s. I think he sometimes has issues because often guys are rarely on base against him. And when they are, it often leads to home run balls. I mean, he's one of those pitchers. He throws so many strikes that it's all almost to a fault, bizarrely. Now different stages of their careers. Lance Lynn is kind of like that too, where fastballs in the zone, to a point where if guys are starting to pick up on it. I thought the Phillies' approaches, you brought up Harper, I thought the approaches in general were very smart, which is, look, the guy's got a power heater. All right, your first few times through the order, you're going to have a hard time catching up to him. The first 2 home runs he gave up were both hanging sliders. The last one, which was his last at-bat of the day, Castellanos finally turned on a fastball, and that was Castellanos being smart because Strider was emptying the tank. It was 2 outs in the 6th, and he said, I'm going to give you my best heater right here. Gave him 101 upstairs, next pitch 100 down the middle. Castellanos crushed it. Outside of Harper, there might not be a single guy in the Phillies lineup that is terrifying or impossible to pitch to, but every one of them has a very consistent approach. It doesn't seem like you're going to find any one of these guys slumping for long periods of time, and that's such an advantage to have a solid 1 through 9 in October like that. Yeah,
really solid 1 through 9.
Great.
Even the areas where, now I shouldn't say the center fielder,
Rojas, yeah.
Great catch tonight.
Phenomenal.
He might be the only kind of glimpse of a no shot.
That's fair, but right in front of him, you have Marsh, who I think is really good. I mean, as an hitter, that guy's gonna slap. Again, as a compliment, he's a dirtbag, man. I like he got the big fucking beard. He's gonna slap Barn, can lift the ball, can hit for power. Had a huge home run last year in October. Like, yeah, that's it's just a well assembled lineup, man. Yeah,
Yeah, even if you take out the hair and the beard and all the aesthetics, like he's still a second rounder high school kid out of Georgia, plays with a chip on his shoulder, who's not some big phenomenal athlete. Like you're born with the baseball DNA. So this guy's just bred for these type of moments. Especially if he's, coming up with the Angels. That had to feel so hopeless, and now catching on and just being one of those guys in Philly where instead of the culture in Los Angeles is awful.
Terrible.
Is it Mike Trout's fault? I'd be more willing to point some fingers at Mike. I'm okay with that. And it's because Mike's so good and demands so much perfection. No, by no fault of his own. He's just such a demanding professional. That's why I say he's one of, if not the best player of all time.
Yeah.
Compare that though to like going into a clubhouse with Castellanos and Schwarber, Harper's rehabbing. Man, that's got to be a cool clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Allows for situations to thrive. He's one of the boys now. And you know what? He should get credit too because they made him sit in the wild card against back-to-back lefties from Miami after starting most of the season and taking the lion's share of the plate appearances in center field. And then they got a rookie in center field. But run prevention in October, as you see with the ball in the gap tonight, is premium. You can get by in 162 if you want to sacrifice your lineup a little, if you want to get the gains in the lineup. Meaning, if you want to prioritize offense in a platoon matchup over an extended period of time for benefit. But in these games where there's short-term variance, I do think there is a heightened priority. God, this sounds like an MIT conference, but trust me,
I like it.
In the short term, more variance, more volatility, more risk. I think there should be a heightened emphasis on things you can control, which is run prevention. So say Rojas is marginally worse, 20, 30% worse offensively. You could run into one, but if you know he's 40% better defensively or he can get to the ball in the gap, like I wonder what the spreadsheet says when it's short term, meaning it's a 5-game series, win tonight. And I think that's what I would guess with what the Phillies did with their lineup.
Yeah.
Bryson stud. That's not a big footnote, but that's a footnote.
Led the team in WAR. Wildly underrated player this season. Great defender there at second. Maybe didn't have the big. Well, he opened up the score. I take it back. He opened up the scoring in game one, which really set the tone. I feel like the 2 games in Philadelphia are going to be what everyone's going to talk about. That game one performance, shutting that lineup down on what was supposed to really be a bullpen day. And to call him the unsung hero is unfair because he was fucking awesome. Ranger Suarez, dude, how about a sub-1 ERA in October for this guy? He's just, very impressive. 2 huge starts for them in this series. It's a prime example of depth. Nobody's thinking about Ranger Suarez until you have to. And then when you do, you realize you're in trouble. So yeah, just they're rolling.
Ranger Suarez had such a good mix tonight.
Yeah.
That allowed him to get away with 93, 94 over the zone. Mm-hmm. He was nipping those corners, pitching inside effectively. And he can cut, slide, curve, probably sweep. I haven't gotten the StatCast, although that's a big talking point this week.
Mm-hmm.
But the mix is so solid. And you saw this with Kenny Rogers when he was with the Tigers. There's your personal reference. Maybe a little bit with John Lester too, to an extent, of where you can overpower without overpowering stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's commanding both sides of the plate at a time when the hitters are so anxious. These hitters, and I know they're professional. These are the best in the world. They're absolutely the best in the world. Don't take away from the fact that you're in the MLB playoffs, standing crowd. Like, it's the same shit as when they say in golf, like you're standing on the tee and your heart's pounding or whatever, or shooting free throws at the end of a basketball game or whatever the analogy is. This shit is as high adrenaline octane as possible. It's so meaning for these hitters. Fucking tempo is the way to get these guys. Changing speeds, moving them around off the plate because they're amped up. Like, I'm amped up to hit Spencer Strider's 100-mile-an-hour fastball if it's over the plate. Now, if it's a Tuesday afternoon and I had a big meal last night and my folks are in town and I didn't really get prepped for the game, maybe not. But I do think there's an element to the power pitching over the plate in the playoffs where, like, the benefit isn't what it traditionally is because the hitters are so anxious and amped up. And, like, a more effective route would be to throw their balance off.
Man, you're on a roll tonight, man. Because that's such a great point because especially in the playoffs, you're facing the best lineups, the best players. These guys have seen velocity. I mean, they've all seen 100. They know how to hit 100. I think Lester is a great example you bring up. It's a big reason why Lester was so dynamic in the postseason, both with the Cubs and the Red Sox, is the fact that, look, the tunneling is what made him so effective. If you're a right-handed hitter, you're going to have that, especially in cold weather, that cutter that's going to jam you in on the fucking hands every single time. That curveball is going to play down. The ability to change eye level, that 92, 93 is going to look like 97, 98 every day of the week. You're going to get a lot of swings and misses, a lot of ground ball outs, and I think it's one of the reasons why Suarez, and through his 2 starts, and even dating back to last October, has been so effective for them.
You could ask a hitter going into a game, at pretty much any regular season game, what are you working on? And they're going to have an answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to stay. Now, they may not have an answer. They may not open up about it. But in just about every hitter's head, they have something that they're concentrating on. I bet all that goes out the window in these moments. If you ask any hitter before an at-bat in October, they're like, dude, I'm just trying to get a good swing on it. I'm just trying to see a pitch I can handle, and we've got to get into the psychology October. We got to get a baseball psychologist in here.
Yeah.
I have a couple other notes from tonight as we're kind of finishing up our Phillies Braves recap.
For sure.
We're going to have NLCS and ALCS individual previews up this weekend on the podcast feed and on YouTube. We're still going to do the traditional power ranking show. Just even if there's only 4 teams left, I don't care. Even if there's only like one series has started and one hasn't, I don't care. We're riding the 4-man power ranking show into the ground. Don't care. For now, I have a couple other bullet points, kind of reactionary stuff. Rob Thompson got his moment. Has anybody had a better 1.5-year start to their managerial career? Man, that's a great thing to look up.
Good question.
Here's where I want my jumping off point for this, where I really feel that isn't, sure, the lineup, they hit home runs and the great. Where I really feel it, going to Alvarado in the 6th and being like, this is my best bullpen bullets right now. Here comes Olsen. I'm going to go to Kimbrel in the 7th. Even though the last thing Kimbrel wants to do is come in and pitch that 7th inning. He didn't have a choice. Rob Thompson probably told him before the postseason started, buddy. Even though he probably didn't have to say that. Kimbrel's a team guy. He's bought into that in the last chapter of his career. Mm-hmm. But that's like, where Buck Showalter's saving...
saving Britain in the bullpen.
No, that's something statisticians or forward-thinking, progressive statistician, forward-minded baseball people have thought. You have to get rid of this closer role and use them in the biggest moments of the game. And I think it's pretty obvious right there that the game would be won or lost. Because you could buy yourself time if you get out of that inning.
For sure. And ultimately, when you got to that 9th inning, I mean, as a Tiger fan, Gregory Soto ain't much. Strom was great. Strom's pretty solid. But I think that the realization, and it's weird that it took baseball managers so long to understand this, your closer is your highest leverage guy. It's not necessarily the 9th inning guy. Alvarado is their horse there. And he had some command issues as well tonight, but they got that inning out of him. Yeah, in terms of best starts to a managerial career, I mean, of somewhat recent history, the only one that comes to mind right away is Tito, where he took over the Red Sox in 04, World Series, break the streak, 15 or 05, they make the playoffs again. I think Joe Madden in 15 with you guys is another potential example. But Thompson, when he took over, it's so weird how quickly things can change in baseball. Phillies were a mess. The Phillies were an organization that hadn't made the postseason since 2011. They hadn't made the World Series since 2009. They were a team that was, at the time, pretty far below the standings and well below 500. I mean, I think that when you're talking about what is so important for a manager, one of the big things is establishment of culture. You bring up how likable this team is, how loose this team is. I really do think that those teams are a reflection of their manager. He's done a perfect job of incorporating new age analytics with that still kind of old school gritty mindset. I think it's connected with the fans of Philadelphia, but it's definitely connected with the players in that clubhouse.
They love playing for him.
Yeah, you can tell.
There's no doubt about it. It's a different team. Joe Girardi was at the World Series manager, Joe Girardi. Baseball guy, Joe Girardi. Top of every managerial candidacy list, Joe Girardi. Marquee Sports Network, on-air talent, Joe Girardi. And the 180. Now, they did have some injury concerns, and not injury. They had some fucking cold, hard injuries, I should say. How much of that is Girardi's fault? He's talked openly that, with enough time, he could have ignited that run. I don't know if that's true or not. I know Rob Thompson did, though. And I know these guys love playing for him. And it's sweet that he gets his chance. And as other teams go and look for managers, go find those bench coaches. Those old-ass dudes in the game that have been just hunting around minor league ballparks. Like, don't really give a shit about drama. They just want to run a clean ball game. Like,
yeah.
Play for me, and God, playing for Rob Thompson's got to be awesome.
It's weird how we do this in baseball, man, where we talk about the importance of youth and how there's so many young managers out there, and yet when you look at the guys who keep winning, I know they lost tonight, but Snichter, Dusty Baker, Thompson, all keep finding themselves, making deep runs in October every year. I know you got guys like Torey Lovello out there, but Torey Lovello's been around forever too. He's a younger guy, but he's been he was a AAA manager at one point. So yeah, experience as well as that just ability to understand kind of the modern age of baseball. That's the magic elixir to me, what makes a great manager.
He's so sweet.
Yeah.
Are the Braves a disappointment?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is, if you would have asked before the season, because before the season, there were discussions of, okay, whose division is this? Is it the Mets, which in hindsight sounds crazy? Is it the Phillies? Is it the Braves? So before the season, if you want to say, oh, well, I could have predicted this, sure, but we know this. Expectations change throughout the year. It will, and dude, I talked about it, dude, it might have been 2 months ago where I said it would be a disappointment if they didn't at least make it to the World Series at this point. I do think that this is the second year in a row where just right before you got to the postseason, some pitching injuries started to flare up, but no, this team's not going anywhere. Okay. And I know that this year's going to sting for a long time. This core is legitimately intact for like another 6-7 years. At the same time, this offense, every one of these guys having the years they had back to back to back, I don't know if that will ever happen again. Now, if they win another World Series, nobody's going to care if Acuna has another 40-70 season, but this was, in recent memory, one of the great regular season teams and easily the greatest regular season offense to come away with that with one playoff win, which was kind of a miracle. It's a massive disappointment. Yeah. I mean, you can't call it anything but. You're lying to yourself if you don't call it that.
It has to be a disappointment.
Yeah.
I agree. Wholehearted disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to say you enjoyed Acuna's season.
Of course.
Yeah. Great. Oh, I enjoyed going to Truist Park. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sure. You had a great summer. Maybe you went on a nice date there. Had a good hot dog. Saw a game with your old man.
Yeah.
Went to Star Wars night. Sure. But when it's that good, if it doesn't end with the World Series. It's very rare, though. I think it's very rare to be able to say that about a team. Like, I'm not saying the Orioles not winning a playoff game is disappointing. I'm not willing to go that far. This Braves team's locked and loaded. They have World Series champion players on that team.
Yeah.
How many, though? Not that much are left over, right?
I mean, do you count Acuna?
Travis?
Darnold, Rosario, Austin Riley, Fried. Morton did not play in the playoffs. Minter. But a lot of those key pieces from the bullpen are gone. No Dansby, no Freeman, no Duvall. Yeah, I mean, it's weird how much turnover there's been. No Strider, obviously, he was still in the minor leagues. There's definitely a lot of turnover. Anthopoulos kind of not reassembled the roster, but made a lot of moves for sure.
Well, the reason I ask is because at what point or how many of these NLDS losses, if it's to the Phillies or to the Mets next year or whoever, then does it become, man, maybe we're just not good in the playoffs? To start creeping in the players' head. Because the same way that we say, oh, you're made for October, is there a way where they just keep losing in the playoffs? And this can become oh, well, who gives a shit about what the Braves are doing in July? You guys suck every time the playoffs roll around.
Yeah. Well, I think next year we're already gonna have that, especially because they lost the same team 2 years in a row now. No matter what the standings look like next year, the Braves could finish 25 games ahead of the Phillies. We're gonna have that. Yeah, October. Be careful. It's so weird how this works in sports because your goal is to assemble as good a team as possible and to win a championship. The Braves have done that, and yet I think much like the Astros and the Dodgers as well, there won't be a legitimate, okay, this was a great, great run until they get their second one. Like, I think the Astros are still rolling, but their championship last year, that was everything after that now is gravy. Like, that was they solidified themselves as that team of that era. I think the Dodgers need one more, and ultimately the Braves, whether it happens next year or the year after, if the Ronald Acuna era, he's like 26. I mean, it's silly to say this, results in one title. Yeah, we're talking kind of disappointment. In the same way, ironically, the Braves of the 90s were. Amazing runs in the World Series. I think 8 straight years in the NLCS, in the World Series multiple times. And yet, they're still, despite how dominant they were with 3 Hall of Fame pitchers, we look back on it and say, God, they only won it in 95. They should have won way more. Right now, it almost feels like history is repeating itself. A year from now, this time, I could look totally stupid because they could have another ring. But right now, in the moment, yeah, I think they're starting to give off those vibes. The only difference is that this is more offensive based as opposed to those teams being more pitching based.
They're very good this year, and I'll say I'll be surprised if they are as good relative to the rest of the field next year as they were this year. Agreed. Because you had historics. You had 3 guys hit over 40 home runs, almost 4 with Albies.
Oh yeah, it was 3. Yeah, you're right. Albies didn't get there. Yeah.
As Big T pointed out, Ozzie Albies would lead 21 teams in slugging.
Yeah,
it's a preposterously good season.
Yeah, just not in the postseason. Yeah.
So I just want to. That's why it's so disappointing. The same roster could show up next year, losing the NLDS. It may not be a disappointment.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and that's what's weird about their off season they're about to have is what else can you do? I mean, you're going to run it back with these same, like it's the same really good players. You just got to hope that the roll of the dice in October lands on a different hand.
Some closing thoughts here about the postseason format. They either have to get to 8 teams or go back to 4 on each side. They're not going to do that. They have 6, so 12 total teams. I should speak in sums. So just bite the bullet and go to 16 teams. Have a 5-round first round. And then it's got 1 versus 8. If they're going to complain, Brandon Hyde from the Orioles said 5 days off was too much. Well, there's no way to get a bye. In the top 4 teams go 1-12 this postseason. Not a great look.
You're right.
The risk too is like Manfred, or I shouldn't say Manfred, but the risk for Major League Baseball is alienating fan bases in the regular season. If we're going to say it doesn't matter.
Right, which I would argue we're almost kind of there. Manfred did say he sees no changes in formats right now. I think this year is a weird look, and it was a year filled with a lot of parity. But, the Astros had 5 days off last year, too, and they went 11-2 in October. I think that we have to take it on a year-by-year, case-by-case basis. When I watched the Orioles, they didn't look like a rusty team. They were a team that had starting pitching that we were concerned about, and that came true because they faced a lineup that fucking mashed. I don't view that as the layoff killing them, but other people will. I guess they lost to really good teams. They didn't lose to 83-win teams. These are really solid ball clubs. So, I mean, I think ultimately we will get to that 16. Like, it's inevitable. We'll get to greater expansion, especially once we get more teams total in baseball. We'll get there, and we will see sub 500 teams make it to October, which to me I don't like because I think it allows for owners to continue to be apathetic. Hey, we made it to the playoffs last year with our 79-win ball club. I mean, 16, Tigers would have been they might have gotten in. I mean, maybe not in the American League, but they would, that's a bit wild. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I think that change and expansion is probably inevitable, and we just have to accept it.
You got some multiverse over there where the Tigers are in the National League?
Yeah, next year when we win the Central. But for the National League, oh man, I don't know. I'm sure that if I do the Doctor Strange Infinite Universes, I'll land on one in which the Tigers are currently making a run through the National League playoff.
If I had to reorganize divisions, I would do it based around historic clubs. So the Tigers, the White Sox, the Cubs, the Reds, the Pirates would be a great division, or St. Louis.
I like that.
Probably St. Louis, and leave the Pirates out east.
We will, and I am very excited about this. When we get expansion, we will get divisional realignment, and I would argue that will be the best thing that will happen to baseball. I think we're going to get 2 divisions in each league, and I think it's going to make divisional races. We can talk about regular season being less meaningful. I think it's going to make divisional races way cooler, so that to win your division, potentially get a bye, however the playoffs shake out, you're going to need to be that 9,500 win ball club. 87 wins ain't going to do it. I think that's going to be really good for the game.
If they do 4-team divisions again, and they add 2 teams to get to 32, 16 and 16 American League, National League, with 4 divisions, 4 teams in each division, I would I would argue they should do like World Cup seeding each year. Like draw balls or figure out some way where they're constantly rotating the divisions. Because it'd be great if you knew going into like the next season, like, oh, if we win this last series, then next year we're in the division with the White Sox and the Twins or something. Or get weird with it, because honestly, the regular seasons it just becomes more and more mundane. That's my big takeaway, or one of my big takeaways, I should say, is I see the D-backs advance, and we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that preview later, guys. We got to sleep on it.
Yeah,
I got to sleep on how these two teams match up. But my point of the Diamondbacks, no one run back the NL Central preview show when I had said the Diamondbacks could be competitive this year, and everybody laughed in my face.
Yeah, and we were. What's weird is we were on them pretty early too, and then they shit the bed for a month and a half. Oh, we'll talk about them, because that's one of those. Even though it is slightly eye roll inducing to see an 84-win team in the NLCS, that team's better than their record. They've proved it here in October, I feel like.
Yeah, we'll put that out on Saturday. What day is today? We're putting this out on Friday night. Friday morning, Thursday night, something like that. So we're going to huddle up again on Friday, tomorrow. We'll do our ALCS, NLCS previews, put those out on Saturday, record Power Ranking Sunday night, put that out on Monday morning. So there's 3 more shows coming between, there's this, 2 championship series previews, and then a Power Ranking, because the 4 of us got to do this.
Right. Perfect.
This is Barstool Baseball. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Phillies.
Oh, yeah.
Braves fans talked a lot of shit this year. Lot of shit.
Tough one to live down.
Subscribe where you guys find it. We'll be back. See you guys soon. Till next time. Blah, blah, blah. Love you.